Welcome back to Kodsnack. This is episode 338. My name is Fredrik, and in this episode I talk to Azad Balabanian about photogrammetry, AR, VR, and where all the tech for this is going. This is the third time actually I talked to Azad, but only the second one that's actually successfully recorded. I'm happy it worked out this time too. And as usual, links to everything we talk about are in the show notes at kodsnack.se/338, and also, of course, in your podcast player right now. And this was recorded at the Øredev conference of 2019, so we'll also, of course, include a link to Azad's presentation. That's about it. Enjoy. Welcome back, I guess, to the podcast, Azad.
Good to be back.
Yeah, so this is the second time it's the third time we're recording because I messed up the technology a couple of times.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Yes, it happens with podcasts all too often.
It's bound to happen eventually.
Yeah. At least this time now we only have one microphone rather than two. And so
it's less room for...
Exactly.
Theoretically, anyway. I've done this before. I can see the red light for recording, which feels good.
Okay.
So, for those who might have missed the previous episode, who are you and what do you do roughly?
Yeah, my name is Azad Balabanian, and last time I was on talking a little bit about like the science side of virtual reality, the science and design side, and that's something that I'm particularly interested in for a podcast that I run actually called Research VR. Where we invite kind of designers and engineers and founders from virtual reality and augmented reality companies to come on and kind of share their learnings. Especially because it's a new industry, there's a lot of learnings that are being done in private or perhaps on Twitter, and so I thought it would be a good place for people to come and share those learnings. So that's kind of the main basis. And on top of that, I work at a virtual reality company called Realities.io, where I'm the director of photogrammetry there, and I specialize in using drones to do aerial photogrammetry and DSLRs and LiDARs to do ground-based 3D scanning. So photogrammetry is basically sort of photographing and scanning and creating models out of reality. Exactly. It's we call it like kind of like spatial photography, where it's not 3D photography because that's typically associated with stereo, like two cameras looking at one direction. Right. And so this is more of a volumetric capture. This captures a scene in its entirety, down to like sub-millimeter precision and accuracy. And at the end, you have a fully photorealistic kind of 3D model of a space, whether that's a room or that's a building or an entire mountain range sometimes. So we use these things for various reasons, some for, like, let's say for tourism's sake, some for educational sake. There's a lot of interesting things that open up when it comes to volumetric photography. But it's mostly still unexplored because it still requires a lot of knowledge, and so it's a very enterprise tool. And one of my goals is to really like reduce that barrier of entry to people that know how to use cameras and have computers that can process these images and create cool 3D photographs or volumetric photographs. So
it feels like you've been working on sort of pushing down the time it required as well. I mean, you were doing like a capture a day for a while.
Yeah. That was I forced myself into making something called Everyday Scan, and it really forced me to like get very good and efficient at what I wanted to do, and also keep the scope of a capture to something that could be done in a day. And I did like 5 a week, and then spent the weekend making a video about it. It only lasted for like 30 days.
It's quite a while still.
Yeah. I couldn't get back to it. I'd love to do more of it, but I still do a lot of photogrammetry outside of work. I post them to Sketchfab, and Sketchfab is a online kind of 3D Instagram almost, where a lot of 3D artists upload their models, and you get to view them, you can download them, or even buy them. And so I try to open source everything that I do, because I think I'm interested in seeing what people can do with photogrammetry, whether it's them capturing it or using it in a game or in a VR or AR app.
So that's a place to go. You might be able to find some resources if you want to play with the data created.
Yeah, Sketchfab is great. I mean, it's 3D is it's all about what you can do, kind of, or if you're an artist, you're limited to the tools that you have and what you can do. Or, otherwise, you have to like find assets, and so I think Sketchfab's done a pretty good job with compiling like a really good store of assets you can download to use in a game. But yeah.
So what's the biggest hurdle at the moment for? I mean, someone who knows cameras, as you said, to create their own scans.
It's the biggest hurdle is less like even of the technical knowledge. It's more of the approach is different. It's a different way of taking pictures. Mm-hmm. So normal photography, it's the shot that you get is the shot that you have. Yeah. I mean, apart from, let's say, some post-processing that you can do to the image, and of course, like God knows you can do a lot to an image. Yep. But if you want to capture, let's say, this room that we're in, you have to take a consecutive or like a number of overlapping photos that require you to move. So it's not a panorama. You're not just standing in one spot and looking left and right. You actually have to kind of have parallax between your photos. Mm-hmm. And it uses basically, like, photogrammetry is built on this idea of structure from motion, which is like this, it's a part of how like simultaneous localization and mapping work, like SLAM, that robots and drones use, or even AR headsets use today to understand where they are in a room. So it has to like look at the algorithm looks at the images, finds features in the images, and then cross compares them to all the other images, finds the similarities or finds the same features, and then can understand where the camera moved in relation to those features, and then can triangulate like, okay, the cameras were taken where it places the cameras in the scene, and then there's a few steps after that where it like can reconstruct the actual geometry of the room, and then overlays the RGB colors from the images onto that mesh, and thus creating like a very photorealistic environment, because it's using the qualities of the camera's lens. So it ends up looking like, especially if you're in the 3D world, like lighting is like having advanced lighting is the most impressive thing. It's like the whole, ray tracing is like the biggest thing nowadays in real-time graphics. But for some, like lighting in real life is still always so good, and it's true. It's really true. And you can do a good job with recreating that in 3D, but the best lighting you can still capture today is the real life IRL lighting baked in, and that's kind of that's how photogrammetry works, at least for now. You can do some de-lighting in a room to be able to relight it in a 3D engine, but capturing a scene with like in golden hour, kind of like those rules of photography still apply. And so you can have like a beautiful photograph, a volumetric photograph in that sense.
So it sounds like the big challenge for someone wanting to pick up starting to scans is how to think about how you take your photos and get the right sequences and stuff like that.
It's thinking about what do I want to capture, and where should I be, and where should my camera be to capture this. There's more technical details you can go into, and you can learn about what's a good thing to capture versus not, and not from an artistic perspective, but more from if you have reflective or translucent materials, those typically confuse the algorithm, because
makes sense.
Especially if let's say you have like view dependent kind of like reflectivity on the ground, like there's the light bounces in a different way. That might create different features that when you're creating the mesh, like it thinks there's a hole, or it thinks there's another room through the reflection. If there's like features being reflected that's behind you or something. Transparency doesn't do very well, but it's I think of it as like an extension of photography, like photo, then video, and then photogrammetry and volumetric video, I think, are like where things are going. So
do you want to capture additional data in addition to the photos, or is it enough to just have the standard photos, so to speak?
You can use a LiDAR scanner, which is basically it's a laser on a ball that spins around and measures very accurately the geometry of the room. So sometimes, if like, again, this is all coming from like industrial enterprise applications. So like people are scanning oil rigs and things that have a lot of metal. So they use LiDAR scanners for that a lot, and it works out really well. You don't have to worry about this reflectivity element as much. And you can combine that with photogrammetry to get those photorealistic colors of a camera, because laser scanners don't have the best color. Well, they typically have like cameras on the laser scanner which do it, but those sensors are like much worse than like using a proper DSLR.
Yeah, of course.
So I think for what I like to do as like an artist, I just rely on a camera, and most of the time I'm just using my phone even. That's the best camera is the one that's with you.
Yeah, right? Of course. So you can actually do a full capture with just the phone?
With just the phone. You have to transfer, the way I do it is I transfer the phone, the images out of my phone and into my processing machine, and I use a software called Reality Capture, which can just take any image and reconstruct a photogrammetry model out of it. But apart from that, I also use a drone if it makes sense. And you can combine different cameras. Like you can even have multiple people taking pictures with different cameras and different from different perspectives. And if they all kind of start from the same place, let's say, to ensure that they have the same features in the same data sets, then things work out well. So that's an interesting kind of collaborative exercise as well.
I feel like I saw some just presentation video or something years ago where Microsoft had some kind of research project for like recreating famous monuments from the photos.
I've seen. I'm sure Microsoft did something similar, or I haven't seen that specifically from Microsoft, but they have worked a lot on projects that relate, that basically use a lot of like the underlying algorithms for this, like with structure from motion. There's something called Microsoft Photosynth. If anyone remembers that
rings a bell.
2007 or 2008 or something.
I think that might have been.
It was a panorama plus. So it was like you could create a panorama, so it was stitching the images together, but you can also kind of like move inside of the camera and have like a Z depth panorama almost. I think that's what I had done with it, which was interesting.
I think that was it. The name sounds strongly connected in my mind. Such an awesome name as well.
Yeah, Photosynth.
Who doesn't want a Photosynth?
I wonder what happened to it nowadays. But Google, maybe must have been 5 or 6 years ago, they were this idea of using tourist photos of especially if something's very famous, you have decades of images being taken of that same place from every perspective. So theoretically, you can totally use all those images. And if they align to each other, then you can kind of create like this volumetric time lapse of a place changing. So I remember seeing this research from like 5 or 6 years ago. I believe it was from Google about they were using tourist photos of like a glacier, and you could see it kind of receding over time. So that was interesting.
That's powerful.
People have done also anytime there's like a cultural heritage, kind of something of like cultural significance burns down. People find all the pictures that they can, try to reconstruct it from that perspective, and try to like have a digital preservation of it in that sense, or digital documentation. I don't think preservation, but like there was a museum in Brazil that burnt down, so there was like a big effort for people to find pictures and to try to be able to like document it in that way. The Notre Dame dome burnt down. People were on the hunt for like the 3D scans and models and images of it. But yeah, I even saw something last week, something in Japan like this. I don't know specifically what it was, but I think it was a temple, and I believe a few friends of mine I think had scanned it, and they were able to show that like have the digital version of it documented. And I don't like the idea of preservation, because that's not real preservation. Real preservation it's in real life, People make that mistake a lot, where they're like, if you scan a cultural monument that's like at risk of an earthquake or of a foreign nation invading and destroying things like that, you can scan it, and that's great. We should have those documents, but you should spend that money also to try to preserve the real place.
It's not like you have the real thing. Right. You have something that looks nice and you can use for reference.
Exactly. So I think over time this will probably get more popular. I mean, it's right now requires kind of like the knowledge and also the computing power to be able to make these 3D models, but with cloud processing, as well as kind of like new camera phones that have active depth sensing. I think that kind of barrier is going to get reduced, and so I think there was I think it was the newest Samsung Note phone has a scanning mode inside of the phone because it has like an active depth sensor. It's starting to get consumer for sure. We'll start to see.
So interesting tech for all this is popping up everywhere.
Yeah.
Because we talked a bit yesterday as well, and you were talking about going to or I asked you about like interesting conferences, and you were talking about how it's really interesting to go and see what hardware vendors are doing.
Right. Especially for AR.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's very little happening. I don't know. I'm sure everyone that's listening to this podcast has heard about augmented reality over the last, let's say 5 years.
Yeah, I would guess so.
And it always seems like it's right around the corner, but anytime you ever try, let's say a HoloLens or a Magic Leap, it's not close to the vision that you were sold on. Let me have a sip.
Yeah.
Because we got a long road coming. AR is really interesting. I mean, there's obviously a lot of promise and potential there, but it seems so distant still in terms of what you want it to be versus where it is now. You want it to be a normal pair of glasses that you wear all day, and it's not intrusive. It just knows. It just works in the background the same way like your smartwatch does, but it should be able to navigate you through, it should be able to paint the road yellow for you to follow. And it should maybe scan the face of whoever you're talking with and show their LinkedIn profile and their Uber rating or whatever. Those
the
are
ideal
horrible
conference
application.
Exactly.
Conferences will go so ham for it. Instead of name tags, I want to do it that way. But what we were talking about was if you like augmented reality. You're not going to learn much kind of keeping up with the HoloLens or Magic Leap. I mean, you do, but you don't see, it doesn't help you understand what's around the corner in terms of what's possible. And so I go to one of my favorite conferences to go to is called Augmented World Expo. There's a US one and there's a European one that happens in Munich that just happened. And that's where you go to really see that low level hardware manufacturers kind of at the cutting edge of see-through displays, of cameras, of mobile processing on glasses, and all these individually, these companies or these manufacturers build demo units that are kind of crappy AR headsets, but their role isn't to make the entire experience, but if you know what you're looking for, you can just tell specifically if they're building the display, the waveguide display or something, then you can really understand okay, we've made this much progress, we as in this industry has made this much progress over the last few years. Oh, this direction is going to be a dead end. Look for displays that are along this track. So that's kind of where I like to be because I like to know what's around the corner and. I don't know. I don't know if there's specifics that I can say that is going to happen for AR, but even Apple, which is the big name in the field, people are saying that maybe they won't have kind of a see-through display, but they'll have 2 cameras. It'll be more closer to a VR headset that has cameras on the outside that you can see through the cameras and kind of do augmented reality in that way. But who knows? There's a lot of kind of rumors flying around.
Yeah, but it's exciting to hear that there's so much going on hardware-wise.
Yeah,
because like you said, I hear about the Magic Leap. I tried the HoloLens once, and it's hard to sort of imagine from that. This is where we are now, but what might be coming? If I don't know about tech that's out there, I can only make stuff up. Smell-o-vision, high resolution. All the obvious stuff. But
and I think we also have warped ideas of what would be good or what would be cool to have versus actually having it in real life. I'm sure there's hundreds of examples of an idea sounded great and then the product hits the market and then it totally fails.
Yeah.
I guess Google Glass is kind of a great example of that, but you can probably blame that on the execution and a lot more than the utility. Because I think it was, I think I tried it once like a long time ago, but the utility was there, but it was like it scared people because they didn't like the idea of
someone's going to go around and photograph me all the time.
The powerful elite with the cameras on their faces, you know. Even
it's not a good image.
Not a good image. I think, man, for AR, that's always going to be there. It's like, to get over that Google Glass hump, it's going to, like, if and when anyone does that, like, that's going to be a major achievement.
Yeah.
Every time there's AR, that Google Glass always comes up.
Yeah.
And rightfully so, you know, it's like,
it
is an intrusive technology in that sense. So.
Yeah, it's hard to tell. And also what I mean, if you are to imagine AR going mainstream like that with some kind of device that you wear, what the killer app would be.
Right.
I mean, because I guess if you find the perfect one, then people will get into it and get over that glass hump.
It's honestly, it's a question I ask myself a lot, even though I follow it very closely and I have like high hopes for AR and like I have my own ideas that I want to implement for it. But the idea or the question of what is the main selling point and use case of AR is still kind of not so clear. I mean. I think, and I'm pretty sure communication will be a big part of it, which I guess, the most advanced form of it will be like, let's say some sort of a volumetric call where you can see the other person's body, you know, volumetrically. But that still requires an external sensor, or it'll have to be like a rendered avatar, same way as like kind of in VR when you meet with people. But even then you can point to, you know, your iPhone and FaceTime being a huge innovation, but 99% of the time you're not FaceTiming people, right? You're texting them and you're calling them.
Yeah, of course.
You're not even calling them. That's like even lower percentage.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's still good to have that high fidelity kind of form of communication that you can use for like very intimate relationships, but not for all relationships. But it's going to be interesting seeing like where AR fits in that realm. But I guess another use case of it will have to be like navigation instead of having to, like, I think smartwatches did a nice leap from your phone in terms of like pinging you when you need to take a right or a left, especially if you're biking. That's when I like to use my watch for navigation. But the ideal sense of it is kind of like for the road to be paved like a yellow brick road for you to follow. But that also requires a lot of infrastructure, of whether it's like, you know, having all the roads mapped, which is a need for right now. Self-driving cars are trying to solve that as well, because they need to also have like they call them HD maps, like basically they're photogrammetry reconstructions of all of the roads in the world. And that would self-driving cars and AR also share some technologies that are the same, and as well as like some problems that need to be solved are there, which is interesting. But I don't know. I use VR on a regular basis for my work, whether it's to like photogrammetry has. Oftentimes there's a lot of noise on the mesh that needs to be cleaned up because it's just kind of wobbly and you need to smooth it out. And unless you're like let's say like an experienced 3D artist that knows how to do 3D modeling, which takes a lot of time to learn, you can use VR to do 3D modeling, which is much more intuitive because it's with your hands, right? You don't need to understand like how to move a camera around, how to use like different extruding tools to create like complex shapes. I use VR in that sense a lot. And I also use it to do podcasting, where I can meet just like you and I are sitting across the table and we can meet and talk in there. So, but AR, I don't know, like it's supposed to be, it has such a tall order. Yeah. It has such a tall order. And even the only consumer thing that really exists today is something called the Focals North, which are these kind of glasses that it's similar to Google Glass, that it's a small display within your glass. So it's kind of like a notification HUD on the top right corner, but it doesn't look like a Google Glass. It just looks like a normal pair of glasses. But the bar for that is like okay, if it's a notification delivery system, is it better than your smartwatch already?
Yeah.
Is it more convenient? Is it more clear? Can you interact with it on a deeper level? Or does it get in the way? And I tried it out, and I don't own one that I use every day, but it seemed like my watch that has now had 5 generations for it to improve is better at doing that.
Yeah.
So if AR can't do that better yet, I can't even imagine all the other things to be a selling point. So I don't know. Maybe I'm too into the weeds of things, and I'm not seeing the broader picture. But it's gonna be a tough battle for AR over the next couple of years, unless there's major breakthroughs in the hardware, and on the software side, like people figure out what's interesting about this. What's the why would anyone want to have this? And the first couple of use cases, like really being developed and sold on those. And as far as I can tell, it's like it's not very clear yet.
Yeah, it's not even like, oh, there's this one big hurdle. It's plenty of different hurdles, and most of them are question marks.
So many, yeah, and especially the hardware end too. It's like, yeah, everything that can be hard about building a new technology platform is at its hardest mode for AR. So it's like you're playing this game on the hardest difficulty as a display hardware manufacturer.
But it sounds like there are quite a few people working on it, or different companies.
Totally. I mean, it is. Phones have totally peaked when it comes to like innovation, right? Like for the last 4 or 5 years, the latest flagship phones have mostly innovated on their camera, because cameras and displays, because there isn't much else to innovate on. It can't get that much faster. Like sure, iOS 13 does have faster apps being able to load quicker. And there's minor upgrades and everything, but like it's always the selling point is the camera, because that's really the only room for innovation. Which gives me good hope about photogrammetry also, because that means, I don't know, at least we're on the right track, that there's a vector of growth that is still unexplored that is related to cameras and processing and computational photography. So that makes me happy that at least I'm not wasting my time on something that's going to die, at least so I hope. But what were we talking about?
Yeah, there are lots of people working on solving the problems,
right?
Or finding the problems.
We were talking about this last night. Where why did Facebook buy Oculus? Like 4 years ago or something now.
It's been a while.
There were honestly, like, if Facebook didn't buy Oculus, or when Facebook did buy Oculus, they kind of validated that entire industry. Like they validated VR being something of interest, AR being of something interest, and I mean, one of the reasons they did that is because Facebook has always wanted to be able to have that kind of complete control over an entire system, both the hardware and software, the same way Apple does, the same way like Nintendo does. So they weren't able to do that with mobile, although like Facebook really grew because of mobile as an app on a phone, but it never was able to have the hardware, or never the camera app. It's intrinsically didn't have access to like Facebook stories or so. It's always kind of been like a second class citizen on a phone. So they know for their own growth and for sustainability, they need to own an entire platform. And so after mobile, everyone's been trying to figure out, okay, what is the next platform? They thought, well, maybe smartwatches and like quantified self is going to be another one, or voice computing, with Alexa and Google Home is the other next platform. That's where all the developers are going to be. And it's true to a certain extent, but I don't think to the extent that investors and developers want it to be. I don't know, at least I haven't seen much utility for Alexa apart from, being able to play a music, being able to play a song that's 5 seconds quicker than being able to boot up the app on your phone, or I guess controlling the IoT in your house. That's like the main use case that I'm seeing so far. Like it. That's cool, I guess. Maybe that'll grow, but where we see the most potential is like still being able to interact with all the software that you use today, but perhaps in a more easier way or in a more deeper interactive way. And that's where like spatial computing, which is AR, VR, Also, industry people in AR, VR like to call it XR. and that's
I heard it.
I don't use that term because it just leads to more questions like what is X? What does X stand for? It's like nothing. It's just supposed to be some term.
Yeah.
So let's just use spatial computing in that sense. But theoretically, all the apps that work on your PC or your phone should also work in spatial computing because it's just generating a screen. And if you have a similar interaction paradigm like a mouse and keyboard or air touch into your phone, like all of that kind of it's a bigger circle. If you're thinking of a concentric circles, like spatial computing is the wider circle that encapsulates both phones and PCs. So it should be at the end of the day an all-around display technology that will work with all the other forms of computing. So that's the interesting part. That's why I'm still so invested in it, and I think there's absolutely a future with it. I just hope that people are thinking correctly about the steps that need to be taken to get there. And I don't know. I guess 90% of ideas fail, and there's terrible ideas everywhere. But I'm just more skeptical about AR and VR, and I like to keep people like on target. So don't waste time. Like you should test these ideas out before you like just pour billions of dollars into something without knowing if it'll be interesting.
So do you think there are any particular things right now that people should be thinking more actively about or ignoring?
I think, sure. I mean, Microsoft's doing a good job with focusing on enterprise as like the first wave of augmented reality, because if you can really like find a use case that makes sense, let's say a factory worker stocking shelves or something, or like even more interestingly, like doing some sort of complicated muscle memory based, or like just something that's manual training. Like you could actually train a person to be able to do those tasks, not out of a textbook or out of watching a video, but to see like to train them while wearing glasses, like to have an overlay hands next to their hands and showing them what exact maneuvers they should be doing. So that's an interesting one, and there's quite a few like enterprise focused companies that are using like HoloLens to do that exactly. So that's really cool. In terms of like on the consumer end of things, I think like photogrammetry and volumetric will be like, I don't know, it makes sense to me that the way you consume these volumetric photographs, the best way for that will have to be in a native 3D display. Yeah. Because you actually get to see the real depth, and you can like, lean in and look closer, or you can scale it up so that it's in the size of, it's a 1-to-1 scale, and you can actually walk around that scan. So we're like, VR right now is perfect for that, because you have like nice high resolution displays, you have very immersive displays, so you're just concentrating on what you're looking at. So that, I think that's really interesting, and I hope to see more on that end. Yeah. Like companies like Magic Leap, I think are concentrating on, they're really concentrating on gaming as one, and like cinematic experiences on the other. And I don't know, that's a really hard problem for them to solve. Like gaming and augmented reality means you have to understand the player's room, and then the game really does have to adapt itself to that room.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine as a game designer.
Exactly. Like it has to be so, what's the word? Like generative or like procedural.
Oh yeah.
It has to be procedural. Yeah. The enemies have to come out of your walls where the walls are the right size and shape. Yeah. Or, like, I don't know. With VR, at least, every player, as long as they have the play space for the game, you don't have to really like reinvent the game to be played in differently for every player. I mean, there's some companies that really do a good job on the accessibility side, and they scale their game for kids and adults, so that because it's hard to reach things as a kid that are high. So they have like different modes of the game that also scale with how big your room is. But I think that's like, I wouldn't require that for every developer, especially for like a one-person team, and and it shouldn't have to be that much upfront effort to build something.
I mean, I've been thinking about that as well. It feels very strange if all of a sudden, all my games, in addition to the usual system requirements, there are room requirements as well. Exactly. So I need a PC of this class and a room of this size.
Right. That was also why people were worried about VR. It's like, it requires too much, too much space. Nobody has a VR room, and like those original kind of arguments of like you need room scale VR for it to even be interesting. I think were. I don't think they were like thinking too far ahead. Where I use a lot of 99% of the VR that I use is sitting down at my desk or standing up at my desk and like within a half a meter of movement. I use it more because of my hand, like the hand interactions that you can do rather than I can walk around or run around my room. So again, I think there's always a disconnect between like what sounds like that would be the main thing versus what actually ends up being used. And so if you want to know, like, if you're a developer or something, like you want to know what is being used, you have to keep your like ears close to the ground. Maybe on Reddit or on Twitter, you have to like see what, or even on Twitch to see how people are using this, what is interesting to them. And if you're building a game, like what is keeping people engaged and what is engaging for people to watch also, because for video games today, it's like so much of it is people watching people play video games rather than playing them. I mean, I've exposed pretty much everyone in my immediate circle to Beat Saber since we talked last time. I think last time we talked I had bought it but hadn't actually had time to play it. So I bought it on the PSVR first, and then I bought an Oculus Quest, and now so it's nice and easy to like expose people, and it feels like stuff like that is a really good way of getting people into it as well, because it's nice and immediate, extremely simple. You don't need to there isn't much of a story that you need to like immerse yourself into. It's a very the simple core game mechanic is slicing through blocks coming at you at a specific rhythmical pace, set to music. So and it takes advantage of VR, where it's physical in that sense, but doesn't require a huge room. You just stand in one spot and you slice through these blocks, and it makes you feel awesome. Which is another. This is another advantage of VR. Like it should make you feel like John Wick or any superhero. Like it should make you feel awesome.
I've been playing a bit of Robo Recall as well.
Robo Recall,
and it definitely has that aspect. I mean, it's a shooter, and it has lots of slow motion, and you can reach out and grab things and throw bullets and stuff.
You feel superhuman. You can like pull apart like limbs and arms from robots and throw them at people and make huge leaps.
And that's one where I can feel the use for more room around me, because it's easier to stand in one spot with Beat Saber, but I mean, Robo Recall ends up twisting you around quite a bit.
Yeah, you can end up also like slicing your hand through a TV or something.
There are some marks on my Quest controller, like walls and stuff.
That's a common like post on like some of the VR subreddits where a beat or super hot takes claims another victim, and it's like another TV that's completely shattered. But growing pains, I guess. Until we have better like cameras and guardian systems that show you where you are in the room, and if you're getting close to an object, like it should show you that object. And the Quest does do a good job, by the way, with that, where you define the play space, and if they even do some anticipatory things where if your arm is swinging around, but even before it gets to the play space, it shows you the play space because it's predicting that your arm is going to be there, so you know to not hit the wall.
I think so. They've upgraded that a few times already.
Right.
I think
they're doing a good job.
I noticed myself starting to intentionally fooling the system and drawing a much wider space just to avoid the lines. But I know I'm doing the wrong thing here.
I do it too. I like sit in a swivel chair, and I like as I'm drawing the play space, I just like spin quickly and just draw the widest possible play space. Because I don't want to break the immersion, but
exactly. I want to stay in here. You were mentioning some really cool shooter that wasn't quite out yet for the Quest, right? Is it called Pavlov?
Pavlov, sure, so I guess we were talking about like future of esports or like video games and where VR fits into it. VR still, by the way, is like even amongst video game people, it's not a sure thing yet. As in, it's not like the PlayStation 4 or an Xbox One where you're like, everyone that doesn't have one knows they will want one, or knows they want one.
Yeah.
And, you know, they just don't have like the funds to get one yet. VR is not in that bubble yet, and for good reason. You know, there hasn't been the right content to attract all the gamers to it, and there's still a lot of like learning and growing pains on the ergonomic side for it to get there. But the latest iterations with Oculus Quest and the Valve Index, I think quite a lot of that is starting to change. So the Pavlov is interesting. It's kind of like it's a very good Counter-Strike clone. And I say that in like not in a demeaning way, but in like they just took all the best things about Counter-Strike, like the game modes, how the rounds play out, how many players there are in a round, and even on the PC version, there's custom maps, so everyone's just been making like Counter-Strike maps, and then DE does, and like, or even Call of Duty maps, and it's fascinating to be able to play in these maps, but like not like because you know them from memory and childhood, but to be able to move through these places, in one-to-one scale and like peek out of windows that you've always seen, but like I don't know, I had like a very nostalgic moment going through. Was it like Crash? Was it called Crash Site or something from Modern Warfare 1 or 2? Oh man, it's been a couple of years, but there's a lot of interesting things happening there. But I guess why we were talking about this is why were we talking about this with Pavlov in terms of?
That's a good question. I was thinking about movement and controls, but I think I asked about that after you mentioned Pavlov. Maybe it was something about like side-loading apps or what's available in the Quest store.
We were talking about movement also, which is a big open question with VR still. That was actually what I talked about last year here at Øredev. Was about kind of what sort of learnings have we learned over the last few years about locomotion. Because when VR first came out in 2016, everyone was terrified about motion sickness and VR sickness, which is still an issue to a certain extent. But people now are less worried about using just normal like video game controller stick locomotion versus teleporting, because teleporting kind of sucks, and it feels disorienting every time you blink teleport somewhere, and you don't see the movement of you moving there, and you also don't build a very like a high resolution map of where you're moving through, like a mental map, unless you see yourself moving through the space. A lot of how we like understand depth, it comes from movement rather than our two eyes. So stick locomotion is like become kind of a standard for all like shooters in VR, or for most. I don't know, maybe not all, but people demand it now. Like gamers demand it, and which is a good thing. I'm a fan of that. But the interesting thing is, like, you can. I also watch a lot of YouTube videos of like gamers playing games and doing funny things with it. In VR, the ability to be expressive in a video game is so much higher because you can just tell the person's emotions just by looking at their hands. So if they're frightened, they're like literally their hands are flailing apart. Or they're like, if they're being sneaky, they have like a knife in their hand, they're like sneaking up behind a person, and they're like tapping on the shoulder, or they make a sound, and then they like, like stab them or slice them. And there's some YouTubers, like one is called Lonely Viper, and oh my god, it's just so funny, like the things that he can do. Or even he takes like two pistols and he crosses his wrists together and makes like a pigeon. It's like, and then that's like a signature move with two deagles, and then he shoots someone. And like, you obviously wouldn't be able to do this with like PC games. And it's when I see things like this, it kind of gives me that foresight of like, okay, this is why VR games are going to be interesting over the next decade. It's because they're so much more expressive and expressive for people to watch, but obviously also so much more immersive for the player that is in the game. And so when a grenade goes off next to you, you're just freaking out.
It's
terrifying.
Watching esports can become a totally different thing as well.
Right.
That might be a motivation for people to get a headset.
I
don't have to watch it flat. I can walk around inside the match if I want to.
Yeah, actually. What was their name? Valve. What was their name? They even made like a Dota companion app in VR for you to be able to watch the games.
Oh yeah, it makes so much sense.
Yeah, you can like. I guess it wasn't all that interesting. It was like a big flat. It was like a cinema-sized display that you got to watch the match in. But like, I think they also had a 3D map of the map with like the players. You can see that. There's been a few other like companies that have tried to do the whole like audience viewing and experience in VR for a normal 2D game. You know, you don't have to be a player in VR, but you can actually be in the environment as the game is happening around you. They didn't work out for all sorts of reasons, most of which being like there aren't that many people in VR yet. So even especially if it's a very niche thing like that, like you're just not going to be able to attract the numbers that creates like a sustainable thing, at least just yet. But the ideas are definitely like there, and they're quite ripe, or maybe not ripe yet, but like they're begging to be ripened, and they're begging to be like developed further. And I think with scale, with more players and users, like we're going to start to see a lot of interesting crossovers of where AR and VR kind of, they don't have to be their own separate worlds and apps and their own silos, but they just integrate into already existing software and games. Yeah,
and I mean, once you're in a VR headset, it's easy to sort of start to imagine an AR extension where you like, have the cameras and pass through images and start laying out the stuff on top of reality.
Right.
And it's not something you want to wear outside, but it might be really useful in context. Right. Like if I'm working,
I can see like AR as a companion to your phone. You know, to be able to, you know how you multitask when you have. There's supposed to be apps to the left and right of your app, and you're just swiping through the bottom to get to your apps. You know, especially with the new like iPhone X and above, like that's that swipe interaction. So you can imagine in AR to even see the apps that are overlaid next to your phone, or perhaps like rather than just having the screen of the phone, you can extend the screen upwards and further. I mean, it should be an extension to the devices that you already own. And I think also an interface for interacting with the IoT in your room. So let's say you're a light switch or something, you can dim it by like looking at it and turning a virtual go down. Or I don't know, maybe that's not the best interaction, but I do think it is the best kind of like tying. It's going to tie a lot of technology together that is connected right now only through Wi-Fi, but without a good interaction paradigm to interact with.
Yeah, I've been using Firefox a bit on the Quest as well. And they added pretty recently, I think, I discovered it pretty recently anyway, that they added like basic multi-tab support. And they let it out, to the left and the right of your main tab. So you can just look to the side and browse, or you can just push a button and move it to the front. And then, of course, it ran out of resources and crashed because it was an early version. But it immediately felt like, they're onto something here.
It's like you don't need to buy multiple monitors. No. You can just use one display that's extremely high resolution and have access to as much white room around you to place displays as much as you can.
I mean, I'm looking forward to being able to like do work in VR.
The Valve Index or the Vive Pro, I think they're both on the same resolution specs. They're at the point now where like you can use a 1080p or a 4K monitor in VR and like still be able to read the text, which this is a new bar. Like VR,
of course,
text in VR has been a big issue. But now you can like read text and like do most of your computing work in VR. And even with the Quest, check this out. You can stream using Virtual Desktop, which was an app made for people to use their normal computer in VR as a virtual monitor. They also made a streaming app to the Quest so that you can be, let's say, your PC's in your living room and you're in your bedroom, and you can turn on your Quest, go into Virtual Desktop, and with your controllers, like be able to have your monitor of your computer in front of you and interact with it the same way that you might any other way. So I think like, pair that with a mouse and keyboard, and you can actually start to have like real remote working experiences when the processing machine is not even anywhere near you.
It's pretty cool. I tried one called Immersed as well, because I don't think Virtual Desktop has a Mac host app yet.
I don't believe so.
But it was fun. I mean, Immersed worked. I mean, my computer is much too slow, so I didn't expect much. But I mean, it worked pretty well, and it integrated nicely with. It made good use of like the Mac as well, because the desktops I laid out in VR, they had some kind of driver, so the Mac itself thought that you have like 6 monitors here, and so it just works with all the standard system features. You can lay out the screens where you want.
I gotta check that out. Immersed, you said?
Yeah, I think it was Immersed VR, and there was like a trial version. And
nice.
Yeah, so it definitely felt like this isn't so far off to be useful. I mean, I'm using it on this super underpowered MacBook, and it's laggy and stuff, but it's wireless and it actually works.
Yep.
I can sit and write stuff here if I want to.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, again, if you're a student or something and you're having, you live in a dorm and you have trouble finding privacy to work in, or like that was a big problem I had, I guess, in college. Like, the ideal is to be able to just put on, again, it's like headphones for your eyes. Putting on headphones and putting on headphones for your eyes, and just being your ideal kind of learning and working environment from wherever you are, as well as having your classmates or your coworkers be able to show up next to you as a person, as an avatar, make eye contact with them, and work on the same piece of document that you would in real life. I think that sort of like co-presence and co-working on something is like unparalleled. Like you could use Skype or Google Hangouts and screen share, but like, again, you're not going to be able to sit there and like point, like it just the level of like fidelity and is not the same. I think so. There's a lot of room for growth for sure. And so if any of this is interesting to you, the listener, then spend some time and like research into VR, and especially on the productivity apps, because I think that's where you're going to see a lot of interesting applications being developed. Yeah.
Are there any interesting ones like coming out right now? Or?
I think the streaming kind of has been the most interesting thing that was why I bought a Quest, actually. I was obviously, like, I follow VR very closely, but I don't buy every headset.
Because who can?
Who can, and they don't send me free ones, unfortunately. But the Quest I bought because I was like, okay, I do photogrammetry processing requires a lot of hours of just processing on your machine, and it requires you to like click a button for it to go to the next step. Whether it's like alignment, reconstruction, texturing, or just maybe some tweak a few settings before the next step starts. So it required me to be at home a lot, or to use like TeamViewer or something to log in. And so I was like, okay, if I can use my Quest and just like log into my PC and like and interact with it the same way that I would, like that itself would be really interesting. I should also say you could play PC VR games on your Quest using the streaming technology also. It emulates your Quest as something that's plugged into your machine, like as a VR headset. So you can like play really high resolution, good looking games on your PC that's rendering on your high-end GPU, that's streaming to your Quest, which only has a phone, basically like a Qualcomm 835, which is a couple of years old now. So that's I think very interesting to me. I mean, this has been something that people have talked about for a while, about like non-local processing and streaming, but I didn't realize that the first version of that is already happening now. There's some latency issues and compression issues, but I think the potential is like totally there.
And it unlocks so many things when it starts working well, because then it's suddenly anything I can do on my computer I can do over here in VR as well.
Right. To answer your question more about productivity apps also, I also follow a lot of other artists and animators, and to see kind of like where VR fits into their workflow. And that's really where we're starting to see a lot of immediate benefits for filmmakers and animators. So for film, I guess I can quickly talk about like it's mostly on the high end of things, like on the Hollywood side, and the visual effects companies use VR to, I mean, they obviously like 3D model the sets anyway, especially if it's going to be a CG shot. So they have everything in 3D, and then they're using like Unity or Unreal to render them in real time. Place a virtual reality, like use a VR headset and place you inside of that scene, and then they bring in the director who goes around the room, finds different shots and perspectives. They can even now like get a pretty good understanding of how the final lighting is going to look in the scene as well. And to like, rather than just storyboarding and imagining what the shots would look like, you can get the benefit of like improvising on set,
Oh, yeah,
which is a totally real thing. You know, you can do as much pre-production as you want, but sometimes you just see a shot that you wouldn't have otherwise because you're on set, and you can capture that. So we're there, like you can see the last few major blockbuster films, like Steven Spielberg in like a HTC Vive, like lying down on the floor, and he's like checking out different camera perspectives, like. So that's all really awesome. Like, it gives me great hope.
Yeah.
And then kind of on the lower end of things, animation requires a lot of keyframing and like rigging models. I'm talking about like as 3D animation, right? So you have a model, you have to kind of like rig it and kind of give it bones so that when certain arms and legs move, you know, the body moves along with it. Honestly, I don't really know specifically how traditional 2D animation is done with that, or like what the best workflows are. But now with VR, you can not only sculpt the model. There's different ways of also now rigging it or auto rigging the model, and then grabbing the joints, like grabbing the leg in the hand, and then like moving it, kind of the same way that you would do with a clay animation, like stop motion. You just move one leg, keyframe, move the other leg, keyframe, and. Or you can even like, if you have different different points of tracking on you, you yourself can like act as the character, right? Like you don't even have to do the claymation animation. You can be the character. And
this is what I wanted to do.
That's it. Totally.
That's incredibly.
So that works on the high end of things, where if you're trying to do an animation, but also like. The name of the app escapes me, but there's like very basic mocap animation software where like you possess a character and you voice act while you're acting as that character, and you can create like a short funny clip for TikTok or something. You know, like so there, I think like the creation side of VR is really what interests me the most. I think that's where it just opens up such new possibilities that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So
you were retweeting someone recently, right? Who's this is the first like total modeling animation I did all in VR.
Yeah,
that's pretty amazing.
Modeling, animating, and then even the camera work.
Of course.
You do in VR, because you hold a virtual camera and then you move around your room, you know, with that camera, and you can be at a different scale. You know, you can do like a drone shot or like a small point of view,
any size you like,
any size. So I really think it's an awesome package of these. VR and spatial computing just kind of puts a lot of these interesting elements together, and one person can do so much now.
Is this all work inside one single app, or are they moving through a series of?
I mean, there's some apps that do a lot of things, but the cool thing is like with certain formats like Alembic or I mean, like, you know, data format's going to give you the ability to create something in one app, export it, and then use it in anything else, as well as, you know, using it in normal 2D apps. Like if you're already experienced 3D modeler, like you can sculpt something in Oculus Medium and import it into ZBrush and or import it into like Substance Painter and like texture it really well. So that's where the beauty of all of it is. It's like they if it can fit into the pipelines that exist today, then like it fits into already existing workflows and just enhances them and makes them much, much quicker.
So I guess more people are working with like part of their workflow in VR.
Yes.
And then moving back and forth.
That's as much as you can, honestly, that's like as well as it can do right now. And that's as much as you can hope for it to do. Like the ergonomics are not there that you're going to wear this thing for more than like 2 hours maximum. You know, like if you are wearing it for more than 2 hours, like either your head is shaped in the perfect way for it, you know,
you're lucky,
or you like found some good foam that is making your very comfortable. But like, right now, like if the things actually are moving, it doesn't feel like things are moving ahead, and like you might still see some articles that are like, is VR dead? You know, like, or especially when mobile VR. The ones that used your phone where you slide it inside, like the Gear VR, those are now, and Daydream, which is Google's equivalent, those got discontinued. And so the articles came out again like, VR is dead. It's like, dude, that sucked to begin with. Like,
speaking of dead ends, like before.
I mean, I don't
maybe not a dead end as such, but
it was definitely a step, right? And it worked for the time to watch 360 videos and whatnot. But like the main thing, again, about spatial computing is not just the 3D display that's on your head, but it's the ability to interact with these things with two of your hands or two controllers.
Yeah, I mean,
that's really where the interaction becomes like the selling point.
Yeah, so I mean, I was amazed when I realized that to which degree the Oculus controls could like emulate hands and fingers.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, they have like these. They have different ways of sensing where your fingers are, like whether they're touching the button or they're pointing. So you can do different gestures, like pointing to things or thumbs up. I don't know if you can flip anyone off with
I think
the Quest,
no,
but
it doesn't feel like
you can with the Valve Index.
Oh, okay, upgrade recently.
Yeah, you can totally flip everyone off.
Yeah, but I hadn't even thought about like simulating fingers to that level of detail before I saw whichever app it was I tried first that did it, and it's like, oh wow.
Yeah. And actually, the Quest is even getting an upgrade of like, we're going to have free hand tracking now. Like, you don't even have you don't need the controllers to do things. Like, I don't think that would that's necessarily for all video games. Like, I think especially things that you have a gun in your hand, you want to feel something in your hand, you want to have a trigger to fire. But you can imagine just if you want to interact with the UI and watch videos, like
of course.
You don't want to search for a controller. You can just use your hands.
Yeah.
And it comes for free because the Quest has a lot of cameras around the headset that are doing the SLAM tracking in the room. And so using the same cameras, they can like understand where your hands are and like extrapolate where if there's fingers that are being occluded by like the curvature. I guess they have like one of the best machine learning departments at Facebook. So
they do stuff like that.
They've gone very good at that.
Yeah,
so.
It was supposed to come out relatively soon. Right?
Soon, yeah. I think maybe the end of this year or early next year.
Yeah, and they're also going to sell some official, basically connector cable to connect to PC, right?
Yes, and so you can even, they're selling like a special USB-C cable. I think it's not that special. I think it's just special because it's long.
yeah, that is special, but it's really useful as well.
It turns into, becomes a PCVR headset when you connect it that way. So it emulates a Steam VR headset or a normal Oculus Rift. This is Oculus looking at the streaming things that we were just talking about. Yeah. They apparently they did look into it and they determined that like, okay, if you really want it to be wirelessly streaming from the PC, we would need dedicated special hardware for that in terms like a basically dedicated router. But they're like, it's not good enough yet using the router that you do own. Like I said, there's like some latency and compression artifacts that you get using virtual desktop, but they were like, okay, what we can deliver now is just with a USB-C cable, you can get like as good of an experience as a normal VR headset plugged into your PC would, which is awesome. Yeah, and it also means for development, you don't have to now just build something or like from Unity, you don't have to build and then push to your deploy to your Quest.
Time saver.
Yeah, so you can just press play and be able to try. So. That's gonna be nice.
Yeah. So just quickly, what kind of PC should I look into buying to get a good experience out of that?
Actually, I mean, man, a few years ago, if you had asked me this, like the barrier for that would have been so much higher in terms of like you would have to have the best graphics card and like the best CPU, GPU, and like basically the most high end PC that you can buy that's like put together. But nowadays, like. If you buy a GPU from like 5 years ago or maybe 4 years ago, it's like quite adequate for it to run. So I don't have a specific name or brand for me to give you. I'm sure there's like
it's probably a good sign. Sure. Well, if it was this brand and this version is the only one, it would be kind of sad.
If you're building right now a gaming PC, even if you don't want it to run VR, it's most likely going to be able to. So it's gone to that point, and that's just.
And the GPU is the main thing to think about.
For the most part, yeah. I think like CPUs also.
They kind of stand
on that, but
still a little bit.
Yeah, but I mean, again, since 2016, we're almost in 2020 now. Yeah. Like, there's been a lot of years, and so even if you're buying hardware from a few years back for a lot cheaper, it's like you're going to be running all the major games, probably like the best settings.
Yeah. Cool.
Don't quote me on that.
I'm cutting that out.
That's going to be the slice. There's a clip. Azad Balabanian.
Yeah.
Owned.
We've used up our time. Time flies.
Oh,
It
man,
was super
yeah.
interesting as always.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah.
We didn't even talk about eye tracking, but maybe another time.
Maybe another episode.
Cool
There's always room for more episodes. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, appreciate you having me.
Yeah, thanks.
Let me put it this way, Mr. Raymer. The 9000 series is the most reliable computer ever made. No 9000 computer has ever made a mistake or distorted information. We are all, by any practical definition of the words, foolproof and incapable of error.